Good evening, good evening. Um, we will. Erev Tov. Thank you, Ron, for working the door. Thank you for being here, far and near. My idea is to do a bit of teaching. Like there's a tradition of studying. I mean, Judaism. There's a tradition of studying all the time for any reason. Oh, your team injured the opponent's quarterback and made it to the Super Bowl as a result. Study some Torah, right? Whatever it might be. And it is a thing for Shoshim, right? And I started doing different things. It's hard to pick. I like call a friend and like, oh, what we should say something. We started studying some Mishnah, things like that. But it was hard to pick something because, like my dad, not a book reader. Like certainly not, he's not going to sit down and study Torah, not his shtick. And it was so I had a hard time trying to think of something to do. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll do the laws of tzedakah, like tzedakah being like central to who he was, giving time, but like somehow like it wasn't just grabbing me. So I studied Pesachim. Passover is important in most any family, but like it just wasn't grabbing me. So I landed on what I landed on. You'll see what it is in a moment. The other thing that I considered doing and am not doing is to talk about the things surrounding death, because I get an excuse to talk about death now, which many people don't want to hear generally, because we're people who over the years have learned to whisper things. And I'm not going to do any of it in depth. I'm just going to say a few things fast. One, plan things out. You don't get to plan when you're going to die. That, thank God, is past our ability. But like make arrangements so that your family, friends, whoever it might be, like don't have to make decisions or more decisions that have to like in the moment. That's a mitzvah. Like you never know when it's going to come, but if you have it planned out, it can save some family fighting. My parents are good planners. My mom actually is here online because she doesn't have her temple meeting until 7:00 Central Time. But like any nice Jewish family, didn't want to plan this out, but finally did, and it sort of made when life was most difficult, it made life slightly easier. Also, I want to say now I'll have the excuse to do so. Make sure your family or friends who will be there making decisions, if you're not able, are informed of what your values actually are. And I say this in part because I very, very, very frequently actually get people saying, we're a religion of life, Rabbi. We're supposed to choose life all the time, right? When they're faced with life and death decisions. And the answer is, yes, and it's true, and there's no need to make decisions that prolong the dying process. So doing things that preserve life, yes. Prolonging the dying process, really not necessarily. And that framing is super helpful. And make sure, ideally in writing, that people who are likely to survive you and likely to be called in a difficult moment know what your thoughts are on that, because there's often people don't know. Often people feel guilty, so they want to put everything on the table, which is appropriate to do until the moment when it's not. And sometimes different family members have different opinions. Somebody thinks this and somebody thinks that, and somebody read a book once or went to a lecture and they think that Jews are all supposed to do X, when that may not be the case. So make sure that your thoughts on that are very clear to the people who are making decisions. I just think it's important to know and important to say. And again, there is no need to prolong the dying process. There are texts on that from the classical sources that I could have brought, but decided not to. The less popular part of that, by the way, is artificially hastening death is also not kosher, meaning even in painful situations, lessening pain is always okay, but what's called medical assistance in dying or physician-assisted suicide or medical-assisted euthanasia tends not to be, is not kosher, even if legal in New Jersey. We can do stuff on that at future times and feel like doing it tonight. What I felt like doing tonight is what I have here. I don't know why the machine made super large copies of it, but that's what it did. I put the link to the text I'm looking at in the chat. This is from the Talmud. Now, I'm looking at a piece from the Talmud, and I want us all to. I'm going to ask you to actually study it and read it. The Talmud is a curious text. Many Jews aren't familiar with it. It's unusual. It's unlike anything you ever read. Like when you watch a movie, you have to just accept the world that it's in, right? So if you sit down and watch a movie and you see that guys can fly through the sky, but they're weakened by a chunk of rock from their former planet, you just accept that that's the case. And you don't say, wait a minute, people, you can't fly. And like, there's no reason why like a chunk of his former planet would weaken him. You're just like, okay, that's the world they're in, I'm in. Right? If Han can understand Chewie's growls and Han can understand Chewie's growls, just roll with it, it's fine. So whatever's going on in this story, fine. Just accept the world that the rabbis live in and look for what it's trying to tell you. So that's what I'm going to ask. It is because I think it's trying to tell us something, and it's a curious bit. I actually took this is from Talmud Ketubot 77b. I noticed it in Ruth Calderon's book, A Bride for One Night, and took her translation and the translation from Koren and sort of reworked them a bit to make them a little more accessible. If you're looking on, again, there's if you're online, I put in a chat the link to this. And if you need a sheet of paper, there are sheets of paper. The bold text is the translation of the Aramaic of the Talmud text, and the light text is the 21st century editor, which in some spots is the Koren Steinsaltz editor, and in some spots is me. So that now, ideally, the way this is done is by the way Jewish study tends to go is by people looking at each other and studying themselves. Now, people tend to be uncomfortable when I ask them to do this. So I'm going to actually ask, are you willing to actually learn this yourself for a moment? So the goal, like in a traditional setting, you got one? Okay, good. I just want to make sure. In a traditional setting, people read out loud to each other, then ask questions about the text. And then come back together, and then we read it together and compare with each other like what we got. Are we willing to hazard this? This is what I'd like to do. Even you online, I'll put you in breakout rooms. So what I'm going to ask is turn to somebody next to you. Could be the person you arrived here with, could be somebody different. You can like turn pairs, threes, fours, like whatever it is. And the way you do this is read it out loud to each other. This is a story of the Talmudic rabbis. And I put questions at the end, so you can wait till the end to look at the questions. You can read the questions in advance. You can do it along the way, but ask questions as always. What's it saying? Why is it saying it? What did it mean to them? Maybe, and what does it mean to me? what is this text saying? Why is it saying it? What did it mean to them? And what did it mean to me? Now, so everyone present, you start in on that. Everyone here online, you, this is the way tradition is done. Like you can like break off with somebody and do it online. So what I'm going to ask is go into breakout rooms. You have hopefully the text, or I put it in the link, or I'll put it on the screen if you need the go, if you're willing, go into a breakout room and like sit and read to each other. It's awkward. There's no question it's awkward. Just say, hi, I'm so-and-so, and read this. And so talk about it. We'll do it for like 15 minutes or so, and then we'll all come back together and do it all together. So there's an option. I think on your screen, I'm not good with this. To choose. Yeah, you can choose a room and go in and say, hi, I'm this. So the idea is we'll read through the text, then come back and talk about it. So I can take 15 minutes and bounce around. Make sense? All right. Take 15 minutes. You have the text in the chat. Read it to each other. I'll be back. Like doing this, succeeding, possibly. Not an apple, possibly not an apple tree, but yes. Alan, do you want to field this one? One more minute. Right. So. Right. Right. Just said fruits. That's the Renaissance painter thing that they have. Right after they put on the table. But never specified, but implied most likely fit. All the paintings have an apple, and apples are easy to share. But other climate lines, more likely think probably in around. All right, we'll come back together in a moment. Let's look. Let's. All right. Well, break this out and we'll see what it says. All right. Come back together. All right. Nobody said I did this for my bar mitzvah. This is a new text, everyone. So we should start out with a proper bracha before we do this together. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam asher kishanu mitzvah v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So it says, there's a series of parallel stories like this, but let's say they're talking about different diseases, right? That's sort of like how they got on the topic, right? It says Rabbi Yochanan, one of the great sages, would announce, "Be careful of the flies on those afflicted with atan." So whatever it is, it's a severe skin disease that is supposed to be weakness, and obviously they think that's contagious, that's transmittable, and so it's some horrible disease, whatever it is. The word appears. They describe it somewhat in the Talmud. The word appears once in the Torah as a horrible skin disease. It's It's what Pharaoh gets in the Sarah wife sister story. He's afflicted with some horrible disease, and that's the word used. So, but whatever it is, it's some bad thing that they're afraid of. That they see flies around the person who has it, right? So be careful of the flies on those afflicted with Ra'atan, because he clearly thinks that this is transmitted by the flies. Rabbi Zera wouldn't sit in a spot where the wind blew in the direction of somebody afflicted with Ra'atan, which is essentially the 1800 years old in Babylonia version of COVID, to say 6 feet, right? You don't be downwind from these people. You see their minds at work. Eliezer would not enter the tent of one afflicted with Ra'atan. Again, you sort of see like that they have some sort of sense of how this is transmitted. Rabbi Asi would not eat eggs from an alley with somebody in it. They're the, most stringent among us, I guess. But you see, they're all afraid. We have, as we started out, we're a religion where we're supposed to preserve life. So if you see somebody with some horrible contagious disease, you know what you should do? Stay away. Like whatever, don't get it. Like whatever, like the prevailing regime is on how I'm supposed to, don't get it, right? And all the rabbis are on the same page. They differ in how to not get it, but basically they're saying, don't get it. Except Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi would attach himself, davek, like the same word in modern Hebrew for glue. He would attach himself. He would hang out with them, i.e. people through Atan. And they'd study Torah together. Citing the verse in Proverbs, wisdom is love's doe and a graceful gazelle. Well, if you read the verse, it's weird, because there are tons of verses you could use to talk about the beauty of Torah. Lots and lots and lots. If he wants a proof text, there are a lot he could use. This is a bizarre one to use, because if you actually go to the context in Proverbs chapter 5, verse 19, it seems to be talking about sex and not about Torah. Meaning that all the commentators are like, this is probably like meaning the next part of the verse is about the lover taking pleasures in his beloved's breasts. It's not really all that subtle. But the rabbis read it as a being about Torah. This is typical, right? If you know the read of the Song of Songs is sort of love poetry, and the rabbis read it as really being about the love of God and Israel together. He also reads this, that the Torah, he's just saying that the Proverbs primarily talks about wisdom. And wisdom is something that that has the grace and loveliness, I guess, of a doe and a gazelle. This seems to be the sense of it. So he's like, look, what's Rabbi Yeshua's ben Levi's take, possibly? What might he be thinking? He knows what his colleagues think. He hangs around these guys all day, every day. He's the only one in the Beit Midrash, in the study hall, the only one in the practice, the only one in the faculty lounge, whatever your version of the office-like setting is, or of the peer setting is. Everyone's doing one thing and he's doing another. So why is he doing it differently?
Given the fact that he does just the opposite of his colleagues, where does he stand with respect to them? Have they ostracized him? Is he still studying with them?
Yes, right. They would say, right. You'd think they'd be afraid to catch from him, though he's right. Though he seems to be in the Beit Midrash. He seems, and everywhere else we see him, he's studying with them, and a respected member of the cadre of sages. He seems to say that these people have a hard life. Not only are they suffering from this horrible disease, but they're also suffering from something greater. They're suffering, or something maybe not greater, but equal. They're also suffering from being ostracized. It's like everyone's afraid of like getting this thing from him, but guess what? I can tell it from the first paragraph. Does anyone know how this is transmitted? No. We got two guys who won't eat eggs from the alley. Like, we don't know. He's like, look, people are ostracized. We've got a mission. Torah brings, everyone needs education. People need connection and education. So you guys can go off and be afraid together. You know where I'm going to be? I'm going to be with the people who are most in need of somebody reaching out. I'm going to be with the people who are otherwise ostracized. And because everyone needs some beauty and love in their life. And this is what the Torah asks us to do. We're supposed to be with people. I'm going to go be with people. So that's what happens. Now, what happens to his life, we don't know. This seems to be that because this seems to be like a fast forward. We don't know how much time is between this first story, the second story, or if it's linked or not. Meaning, like, does this mean he gets this horrible disease and dies? Though it seems to be maybe a skin disease, maybe it's not fatal literally. The rest, it says, so that if the Torah bestows grace on those who learn it. So this is back, the narrator, the Talmud, seems to say this. Does it protect you? Like, is this really, like, is it safe? Like, sure, it's a nice thing to do, but like, aren't you still supposed to be careful? And then it goes into this story. When the time came for Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi to die, now, is he, 92 years old? Is he 42 years old? We don't know. So, they said to the angel of death, who's the they? That's a great question. Who's the they? It doesn't say the they. It's just Amru. It's just like he said in the plural, they. So the they, one would think from context is the only for me, like the most logical conclusion is like the heavenly host. God is often pictured as being up in the heavens in the throne room, as it were, with all of the angels, or the cabinet. It's like a cabinet meeting. And everyone's around the cabinet table, or it's a throne room, and all the aides and all the courtiers are there, and God orders them out. You go do this, you go do that, and all the angels that sort of are zipping around doing things are all doing things at God's command as God sits there, and there's like, so they're likely picturing a throne room with courtiers as being ordered around.
But it is God, doesn't. In the last paragraph, he's changing his mind.
Well, there are two things, there are two voices from above at the end. So we'll get there. We'll be here now. They, whoever the they is, said to the angel of death, go and perform his bidding, which is also like sort of a strange command. But that's what it says. The Amrule lemelech hamavet zil avid le ve'uteya. He said, go do his bidding, which seems to be, everyone knows when it's time to die. And the angel of death comes, and he's got the knife. The knife, I presume, is the scythe, that this is like the Grim Reaper thing going on, right? Like that it's the Grim Reaper with the big scythe, like I don't know. It's some version of like what we have in our mind, I guess. And the angel of death is told, all right, your next mission, it's like, I don't know, the DoorDash guy, it like pops up, your next mission is going to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. But when it's a tzaddik, the tzaddik gets to call his own shot, right? If you're a righteous person, you get to pick the manner of your death because you're a righteous person. That seems to be, at least in part, the link to what came before, like that you get to pick. You know you're going to die because the angel of death has shown up, and there's no getting out of that. But you get to pick. So they say, Tzaddik didn't get to pick, go, and you get to do what he says. You can go to Gan Eden. Gan Eden is their Garden of Eden. It's their word for paradise. They'll never say, or they rarely say, there's no like heaven, clouds, harps and halos and everything that's pictured in the family circus. That's my image. It's the Garden of Eden, Gan Eden. That's their word for the paradise that you're going to, God willing. So he says, show me my place, Mekomi, show me my place in Gan Eden. I get it. I'm a good guy. I'm going to the Garden of Eden. Show me what it's going to be like there. And so he says to him, okay, we'll do it. The Hebrew translation, it's in Aramaic. Steinsaltz's Hebrew translation is Beseder. All right. They told me to show you to do what you wanted. So if you want to go see your spot before you get there, I'll give you the free preview. So they start going to the wherever paradise is, they start going there. And then Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says to him, give me your knife. Because it's super scary walking here next to the big knife. And he says, okay. Why does he give it to him? Because they said, do what he asks. What's Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's angle on this? It could be, right, so we don't know, like you've read to the end of the story, so is he already plotting? Does he see his opening? Or is it just honest of like, this is freaky walking next to the Grim Reaper, like if you slip and hit me with that, then it's all over. At least, let me carry it. When he arrived there, he lifted Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and showed it to him. One of all the images I've ever had of the world to come, or paradise, or the Garden of Eden, or heaven, or whatever it is, it's never like had a wall that somebody could like prop somebody up on, so they could like peek over. Like this is really like what it is. Like it seems like this is like it's sneaking to Ebbets Field or something. Like right, gate.
Gates, they have to be attached.
They have to be attached to something, I guess. Right. Right. Without a wall, it's not like a fence that you can just look through. Yeah, otherwise you can just walk right around the gate. So wherever it is, the angel of death can take Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi there. And he can do this thing, which is awesome. We got I feel like other religions might have more security in their paradise. Ours seems to be pretty lax. And then Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, apparently seeing his opportunity, just swings his leg over and jumps over the wall into the Garden of Eden. Even though he's about to die, but apparently there's some sort of grand advantage to spending eternity in paradise and never having to die. It's not quite clear. It may be that like you get it's not just like the pleasures of the disembodied life in paradise, but you also maybe get to still enjoy the pleasures of an embodied life.
Go back. Before you take me, show me my place. Okay. But he knows he's going to be taken there anyway.
I know. But they said, this is the key thing. So he might be angling.
Just follow his steps.
Right. So he knows he's going there anyway. Why does he want the preview? People like the preview. I don't know. Like you want to, like the same way, like we like to see a picture of the place before we get there or whatever it might be.
But isn't his way was supposed to die first and then go?
Yeah, you're supposed to die and then go.
So he's protecting it out and avoiding that.
Right. So in the end, he seems to be avoiding death.
One of the my takeaways is that I feel that somewhere in here, he has agency. He gets to choose. And I think that is part of the truth here, which I think is kind of peculiar. I mean, I really don't understand the whole thing, but.
It's weird.
And I do know that.
Yeah, that's the angel, right? Well, or angel, whatever the angel of death looks like. Right. 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 Or right. So could be. Let's hold those thoughts for a moment. Like, is the Torah protecting him, or did the Torah not protect him? But he didn't die. So let's keep going. So one, he leaps over. There is an advantage to leaping to, there seems to be some grand advantage in it. There's another spot, there's a midrash in a relatively obscure spot that goes through, there's a small number of people. They like name 9 people over the course of the history of the universe who made it into paradise without ever Gan Eden, without ever having to die. The most famous being Elijah. Right, Eliyahu Hanavi famously goes like there's an actual scene in the actual Tanakh where Eliyahu Hanavi doesn't die. Elisha visits him. He sees Elijah get into a fiery chariot pulled by fiery horses, and it goes up into the heavens. And the fact that Elijah didn't die, we know because every year he shows up at my Seder, maybe also at yours. Right? Yeah, so like that. So you know that, and he goes all the britot and things like this, right? So Elijah doesn't die, and Hanoch is in those like begat lists at the beginning of the book of Genesis, where it says so and so begat so and so, lived for 800 years and begat sons and daughters, and then he died, and then he begat. So there's a long list of what seem like random names. One of them doesn't have the phrase, and then he died. It says instead, and then he walked with God. So there's a small number of people, and in the Talmud, there's a few people. There's Elijah, there's Hanoch, who walked with God instead of dying, and there's Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who does this great escape. So the angel of death grabs him by the corner of his coat. So what's the portrayal of the angel of death here? How do you describe this?
Well, he's not in physical shape, so he can't climb over the wall.
He can't climb over the wall. Either he's not in physical shape to, or like Rabbi Yeshua had the boost that he doesn't have. I don't know. He might not be allowed. That's my other thought. Yeah, maybe part of Gan Eden is that he doesn't have agency there, right? Satan is different. Though also presumably in that court, meaning Satan Jewishly is just another angel like doing things, just something of a pot disturber. Grabbed him by the corner of his coat. This is like it's somewhat pathetic on the part of the angel of death. If you're just like desperately holding on to someone's coat, like saying, come back, it is a little pathetic and not very angel of death-y. Like the Grim Reaper usually is a little more fearsome than holding on. He's also blew this one, sort of like, we told him to do what he wants, but not that. Like you're not supposed to let humans run wild in paradise. Like you had one job. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, I swear I will not come with you. What's important about that? He swore. And the second of the 10 commandments is, don't take God's name in vain. When you swear, we're swearing on God's name. When, again, like that, the second of the 10 commandments isn't about saying the word God damn it or something like that. It's not about stubbing your toe and not saying that. It's about not using God's name in an oath for nothingness. Right? That's what the whole Kol Nidre thing is about, right? Don't take God's name in an oath for nothingness. So he makes the oath saying, I swear to God, I will not come back with you. And once that happens, he is forbidden from breaking his oath, and he's still alive. The rules still apply. He can't break his oath. It's against the Torah to break his oath.
This whole thing is like scary. He was playing the game.
It seems Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, after this lifetime of like being this tzaddik, like has it all planned out. So I mean, we're not there yet, but that seems to be the case, that he like smells his opportunity. This is now or never. I can do a few things here. I can escape into the Garden of Eden without ever having to die, meaning that I get to live forever. And not only that, but I will be the one who forever defeats death.
But it says here if he did not ever request a solution of.
Of an oath, yeah, so let's get,
He seems to have the option to do that.
well, so this is the key thing, like so there's
He
a,
could have his oath dissolve this also.
right, there's the rabbis have a procedure for dissolving an oath, right? That, I mean, this is, Kol Nidre is a big public reenactment of this, where if you made an oath, you're locked into it for life, unless you, like, there's a procedure, you're supposed to get the person you made the oath to, and a number of sages together in a room, and there's a whole procedure for it. It's actually it's like in the back of the Art Scroll Siddur, like you can find this. Like there's a whole procedure for dissolving an oath. And it's this whole serious procedure that, if you said it, I know I said, I don't know, I swear I will, I don't know, what is it, something that somebody swears to do that I'll pay you back by March 1st with interest, but I'm not going to have the money on March 1st. I will have it on April 1st, but I need to be relieved of the oath, because otherwise it's not just you I've sinned against for borrowing the money from you and not paying you back on time, but it's God, and that's not you paying it back in time is a sin, but it's like sort of like low grade that I pay you back late. The violating an oath to God is a capital crime, as it were. I can't do that, so you get absolved of the oath. Or like they always think of that, they always picture the rabbis always picture women in childbirth saying, "I swear this hurts so much, I will never," looking at their husband, "I will never have sex with you again." This is like their signature example of an oath. So in a moment of distress, they make the oath, but they actually, in the rest of their life, might not necessarily want to keep. They need to be absolved of the oath, or like, this is no atheist in foxholes. I swear, if I make it through this, if I just make it through this, I will donate $100,000 to the shul, whatever it might be, right? Like, this is sort of like the typical thing that people do. You need to be absolved of that oath because you weren't really in your right mind when you made that oath.
That was the Catholics got the idea of the money.
Yes, so the rabbis have a parallel procedure. Kol Nidre is a big version of that. All the times you said, "I swear I won't," you really didn't mean it. So the Holy One of Blessing, this is God's self in theory, comes in and says, if he ever took advantage of that loophole, then we're taking advantage of it here. If he ever went back on an oath, then he can go back on this one too. But if not, then not. Meaning, if you are always, 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 always true to your oath, then we're not going to make you break it now, because this is who you are. You've always kept your word. But if your oaths weren't really oaths, then your oaths aren't really oaths. And in fact, he had lived his life in such a way, he had never made a false oath, or never had to go back on an oath. And so he did not have to return. But never went to Kol Nidre, right? Kol Nidre much later. Yes, he's living a few centuries before Kol Nidre. The angel of death then says to him, "At least give me my knife back." Possibly in that voice. Again, the angel of death, sort of pathetic, like has now been totally outmaneuvered. And he realizes that Rabbi Yeshua gets to spend eternity over in Gan Eden, where he seemingly can't go, and has the knife. And Rabbi Yeshua Levi is sort of like, you picture him like looking back over the fence, being like, I got it. And he's like, I've done it.
So you're saying he wants to stay?
He's
there,
staying. He's
but he doesn't
staying.
want to die.
He doesn't want to die. And what he's done now is he's defeated death. No one ever has to die
"I will
again.
not come with you, the angel of death."
Yes, he's saying, I won't come with you. I'm staying here in paradise. Well, he's done both. He's managed to stay alive and make it to Gan Eden. He and Elijah, this is premier status, right? This isn't just like Gold Club or whatever. Like, this is like, it's a yeah.
We get the black card?
He got the black card. It's like, it's him, it's Elijah, it's Hanoch. It's like 4 people like ever achieved this level, and he's achieved it Not, I mean, Elijah got it by getting pulled to heaven in a fiery chariot pulled by fiery horses. And he's done it just sort of very rabbinically by cheating or trickery or sees he doesn't seem like such a good guy, but yet he's figured this out. And then then a divine voice, a bat kol, which is God's voice, but somewhat lower status than the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One of Blessing from earlier. So still a divine voice comes from heaven and says, give it to him, for without it, people cannot die. And then the scene cuts to Gan Eden, to paradise. And Elijah, no less than Elijah, is now announcing the arrival of a new member of the club, saying, make way for the son of Levi, make way for the son of Levi.
And we don't know if he gave the knife back.
It seems that the implication is that he did, that you have to listen to the bat kol, because people do die, so we have the experience. Two, the fascinating thing is that God intervenes, I guess, 3 times, the Amru at the beginning that they said, but twice at the end God intervenes. Once with does he have to go back on his oath? Only if he went back on an earlier oath. Answer is no. And then this one, there is no option. It's give it back to him. It's like very parental. Don't make me come down there. Give the angel of death his knife back. You picture again, like, so the angel of death, like, pathetically holding on to the
Kind of like the inverse of the saying, everyone wants to go to heaven, nobody wants to die to get there. Not the inverse. Maybe this is true in act.
He didn't die to get there.
Everybody wants, but we don't. We couldn't do that.
So he figures it out, and it is through this sort of little cagey way.
What's the advantage of being alive in Gan Eden?
Right. We don't.
Versus being dead in Gan Eden?
Right. Yeah. So I think just the presumption is that it's a good thing, that you don't have to go through the difficulties of death. You just woof. He's in being that God, these are God's rules, you're saying, of death. Right. Yes, he did. It's not just defying God. He almost like gamed God.
Maybe he died without suffering.
Or he dies without suffering. Though the implication is that he's sort of like or so it could be something like that. But either way, he's gained some sort of system.
That's the key to me is the they. Right? He was given the opportunity. If there was no they,
Right.
calling the angel of death, he wouldn't have had the opportunity to do this.
Right.
So he did game the system, but he had to think quick on his feet because I don't think he could have stomach.
They, as it were, like didn't think that tzaddikim get to be tzaddikim maybe by following the rules, and you don't get to be such a tzaddik by playing the angles.
He gained the system, or was he given a privilege because he was so?
He was given the privilege, and then he. Rabbi Yochanan, this Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, I believe before. Right. Isn't what happens later on. Right. Famously, Rabbi Akiva, etc., will all be torn apart.
What are the weird things? Few weird things.
One of them is the swearing. It's not like he says, I swear to spend the rest of my life helping the poor. He's swearing something he wants. Like, I swear you're gonna give me $1,000. Swear to God.
Well, no, I can't swear something on you. He's swearing that I swear I won't go with you. It's concerning himself.
And it's say your mom
Right.
says, go to school. I swear I'm not going to school today.
Right. Correct. Yeah. So that
I think he's putting emphasis on it, saying, I'm not doing it.
it's an oath.
And that's the ultimate of emphasis.
He 100% knows that he's never gone back on an oath. He 100% knows that you can't compel somebody to break an oath if they don't want to. And he 100% knows that this is God's rule. And so he smells the opportunity and takes it. Right, that he, does he know that Tzaddikim get to call their shot? And that if it ever comes, that I've got a plan, and my plan is not only am I escaping this world without dying, but I will literally defeat death. The ultimate goal, sort of like of humanity, as it were.
Well, compared to Elijah and the others who were there without dying, he's ready to die. He's supposed to die. He's near dying. Dead.
He's near death.
Oh, he's
He's hanging. He. So yes. So
We'll never know.
he's. So there's a few things here. What does the first paragraph of the story have to do with the rest? Yeah, him and the others. By the way, so there's a lot going on here. He's different than all the other rabbis. They're doing one thing, he's doing something else. By the way, who does, at least before the jailbreak, as it were, who does God seem to favor more? God clearly thinks that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is the cream of the crop. He's the tzaddik. He's the one who gets to call his shot. He's the one who, God allows Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi to stay in paradise without dying, it seems. But there's another great question, which is, how does the story get to us? In order for this story to get to us, as it were, who has to tell it? All the other guys, all the other sages who were doing something different have to tell the story to us. This, by the way, is part of the beauty of like the whole system, right? Like he's the minority, but it seems the majority is telling the minority's story and saying, yeah, you know, if you want to get technical about it, God might prefer guys like that. We just don't hold by it. We're still here telling the story. Yeah, so there is this like weird push and pull going on there. They're the ones get that he should be able to do it. The next story is almost at the end of the chapter, but the next story is of another sage who like is given the same treatment, but not as much because the angel of death has learned his lesson from the whole Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi thing. So the reason I bring this now, like by the way, the reason I like this story in part is all these guys are afraid of what might happen and of the ostracized in society. And so that did so I mentioned before when we talked, like my dad was an orthotist. He did back braces, leg braces, neck braces, things like this, braces for everything except your teeth. And he made a point of helping those who are in need. Like we were went in a time when people with special needs and often multiple special needs were institutionalized. He like went to the institution regularly because the only guy who did this stuff to fit people for braces. He made a point of trying to fit people with multiple issues for braces. My mom just texted me 2 days ago. She got an email from somebody emailed the funeral home. You know, people don't know how to get in touch with you. So they emailed the funeral home. And somebody wrote, "It's with extreme sadness and the dearest love that I send my heart to you and your family. We dearly loved Richard. My husband who was quadriplegic. Had his buddy Richard help him for at least 30 years. Everything Jim needed, braces, back and wrist, so many things. Richard had one unique kiss that lasts forever. He's the most beautiful human being. He was so full of love. He radiated, loved, and cared to all. His heart was bigger than his body. Peace to you, my friend. Thank you." He made a point of being there with people who other people were afraid of. Other people wouldn't go near. Other people might have a natural way of recoiling from. Like that's where went and hung out with him. And like his friends would often be like a motley crew of people who were who had issues. And he befriended from all types, like guys who couldn't keep a job and lived in trailer parks, and people who had, again, like multiple disabilities that other people would be embarrassed to be with. He wasn't. Everyone else is like all the rest of the rabbis, and he really saw his space as being something else, which is a beautiful thing. Like, it's just sort of like, my place is with those who are, and with no pretense of any of it. That's part of what drew me to this story, is that the sense of what other people are hesitant to, I will engage in. And they're all afraid of death or of something. They're all afraid. And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi is not afraid. He is not afraid in life. And because he is not afraid in life, he is also not afraid of death. Like, when the angel of death comes, he is cool as a cucumber, ready to, either it's a plan that he's carrying out, or he's thinking quickly on his feet with absolute clarity, because he's not afraid, because everyone else lives in fear and he does not live in fear. He loves his life, but in loving his life, he's able to like not be afraid of death. And I sort of mentioned this sort of like this moment, like I don't know if my dad knew like how bad it was, but there was zero fear. Like, I felt no sense of fear. And I almost wonder if is it something like this, where if you live your life in such a way that you're willing to be with people like veterans who had lost limbs, people who needed prosthetics, people for a number of different reasons, you'd just be cool with it. And the same thing, like after his retirement, I would mention like he went on the board of the local soup kitchen of the Shalom Center, and used all of his business connections to bring people in who could raise money and have political connections and financial connections to rehouse the soup kitchen, which is this 125-year-old building that wasn't accessible, and was able to move into a place that would be accessible, with a shelter for women and children specifically, who otherwise are specifically vulnerable, like the people who other people look down on and are afraid of. Like, he again rushed towards, and that, like, I see that in this text, and that, and also he does it all with no sense of piety. I'm like a goody two shoes, again taking after my mom somewhat, but he did it with an edge, like with beer and with cigarettes and with dirty jokes, and again, like, not sitting here poring over all volumes of Talmud, but in bars and in taverns and hanging out with the dudes, and I also get that sense from Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi here at the end, like that sort of like, I'm going to think of a way to game the system, that maybe being a tzaddik isn't following the rules. Maybe being a tzaddik isn't like what we think it is. Maybe it's like having an angle. Maybe it's thinking of the different angles you can do things, and that really, if you want to make a change in the world, maybe sometimes you have to think around the edges. And that's I can use your rules against you. I swear I won't come. I'm going to deceive you if I feel weak in the position, but I think it will ultimately achieve good. You're scaring me with that knife. Let me hold it. Like, all of that, like, seems to be like playing the angles, and maybe like that's part of this too. That being a tzaddik doesn't mean being a tzaddik gamor, as I'll say, like some sort of perfect, blameless person. Maybe you're supposed to have an edge. And that also too, like, made me think of my dad, like sort of like this, doing good in the world, but not in a pious way. It's something different. And lastly, like sort of this sad line at the end, like, he has the knife, he's done it all, he's made it into paradise alive, outsmarted the angel of death, outsmarted God's self, and is standing there with the knife, home free. And God says, give it back to him. Without it, people can't die.
Well, he didn't say leave.
He didn't say leave. he stays, so it seems like, I picture him like sort of having to like toss it back over the fence that he could look over. And that there's sort of the sense that we experience death as a bad. God seems to be saying to Rabbi Shua ben Levi, he's like, but God's like, from my angle, not so much. Like this is part of it. Like without it, people can't die is like left on its own, sort of like as an obvious good, as it were.
You know, it's not like God never made an exception before.
Right. We have this small handful of exceptions. But like in general, it seems to be that we're all here, and that this is, again, like what makes life meaningful is how we spend our time, the fact that we have limited time, and given unlimited time, our actions wouldn't be meaningful if, it's not meaningful for
That since he's in the Garden of Eden, he's not gonna die?
yeah, the implication is he's not gonna die. He's living forever. He's gonna live forever.
You can show up with your favorite.
You can show up at your Seder next year, right? Or at the next right, right, the tree of life is there. It's that we're here, and that even though our time comes to all of us, I feel like there's something here in being with those who are otherwise shunned as the value that God truly admires, and that's hard. That's why I taught it to like the teenagers, because this is the dynamic in every middle school and every high school and every workplace, is that they're the cool kids and the not cool kids. And like part of this is there's a value in being with those who are otherwise shunned, and maybe having an edge along the way. All right, Ad Khan. That's the story I wanted to teach. It is an unusual story from the tradition, but for some reason it just resonated with me at this time. Thanks for coming. Speaking of the angel.